I'm Kelsey Moser, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel, where no sandbagging goes unscrutinized.
Right, this is another episode of Elitists United, the show where we discuss the LEC. But here's the thing. For this episode, our guests are two players from Schalke. So it's Odoamne, the top laner, and current starting AD carry, because that is technically, based on everything we've been told, the fact, current starting AD carry, Innaxe, formerly obviously player from the challenger scene, right? Veteran, when we do this episode, it seems pretty obvious based on the guest lineup that you want to talk about the whole Forgiven angle and the whole Schalke thing, and that's like going to be a main occupation of the show, right? That does seem fairly obvious, right?
So I want to just add something quick, because a lot of people do basically know Innaxe for being a Challenger Series player, etc. But Innaxe was also on the Unicorns of Love lineup that brought Splice to 5 games at the World Championships. They were the team that almost denied Splice the main stage at the World Championships. So he has like a lot more experience than just Challenger Series as well. And it was a pretty good
I'm confused. What do you mean when you say the World Championship? What are you referring to there?
So he was in the play-ins of the World Championship last year.
Oh, right. Apologies. I'm thinking of Unicorns of Love like when they were European.
Yeah.
You mean when
Unicorns
it was
of
the LPL?
Love are now a Russian or a German team,
right.
and they had Innaxe on the Russian team, and they got to play-ins, and they took Splice to 5 games in the playoffs of the play-ins. So
right.
You almost denied Splice. That was a ridiculously close game as well. Like the 5th game was obscenely close. They could have very easily made it.
That was one of those what-ifs up there with Gambit almost beating Cloud9 that time, which could have denied N8's one good run ever. That's a what-if for us, Europe.
I mean, given the group that Splice went into, they probably could have actually done a pretty decent Monday. They could have done another ANX. But Schalke were pretty good picking him up, given the situation that they're in now. So I think there were very few AD carries that you could really take, but Innaxe is actually one of them. So I'm glad he made the transition up.
Right, where do we want to start this discussion then, Veteran? Because the problem with this is, right, everyone knows you're obviously big pals with Forgiven, like you've obviously worked with other teams in the past. So everyone's going to assume, right, that you're going to defend him or you're going to be on his side in some way. Right, these guys, even though they were his teammates, they're not obliged to do that at all. Like, based on some of the things I've heard, I wouldn't be surprised if someone tell them to fuck off. So where do you want to start with this, mate? Where are you going to start? This isn't about, one thing I hate is, we're not going to do that shit of like, you've got to present all the sides. Like, no, you just present your own side. That's it. That's the only obligation anyone has in this world. So give us your take on it then, Veteran, the situation where, for people who don't know, the main problem is this. The fact you have to establish at the beginning is that the world found out about this by it being announced that Innaxe was going to be the starter, and then Forgiven making this very bizarre, cryptic statement in which he tried to imply, in fact, forget imply, he overtly said that it was a mutual decision and that he was the one stepping away. Now, as far as I can tell, that's literally like someone saying, I'm putting you're fired. And then you go, fired? I quit. You can't fire me. It's like that just seems like absolute nonsense as far as I can tell. So where are we starting off on this one, Veteran?
My information on that, and obviously these two guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my very well sourced information on this from multiple angles is that Forgiven left after Innaxe had already started doing scrims instead of him. And that's how the situation ended up unfolding. My position on the situation is that for the last few weeks, I have defended Forgiven in terms of play. Obviously, I can't defend him to being like an S-tier player or anything like that, but I do think Schalke have much deeper issues than just, the AD carries like overextending or something like that, right? In fact, a lot of the times he essentially has no choice. So he's either going to get frozen out or he could go for the flip. But the way that he quit is indefensible. I don't think anyone should think that anything good was going to come of this. I have no idea why Forgiven thought anything good would come of this. This is one of the stupidest decisions I've ever seen from a PR standpoint, especially because Forgiven is the guy. I don't think he realized what his reputation was predicated on. When people said Forgiven's only being on shit teams, they mean he's only being on shit teams, but he's kept going, right? And he's even performed really, really well on those shit teams. The story of Forgiven was always the story of a guy who was kind of standing against the odds, while you would contrast this with Reckless, who was always on a really good team and handed everything, right? But the moment that Forgiven becomes a quitter, all of that vanishes, right? He's screwed his entire image doing this. I mean, he just looks like a little bitch now. He just looks like a guy who went and cried about the fact that he wasn't on a good team again, and instead of sticking it out and trying to make it better for himself, he just stepped away very, very publicly. And let's be real, that the statement that he made was a low-key flame at the organization, at the team, the idea that changes had to be made around him for this to be good enough, and that he would not stay there if the changes weren't made. Like, you
also made the classic mistake, by the way, of not in any way giving any ground himself in the statement. Like, if he'd have just even thrown in a sentence that said, you know what, and maybe I didn't always play the best, and I difficult, that would have done so much for the like public sentiment. Because the statement, as you're saying, sounded just like everyone else in the team shit, fuck them. I decided to quit anyway, sort of, when they claimed they were going to replace me. So, by the way, I'm just leaving like League of Legends for now. Like, I don't know in what universe he thought that was going to be received by anyone's brain, and them go, well, that's cool. Still a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, that isn't the image anyone has of Forgiven. That's like the most diehard Greek people whose only image of Forgiven is like, oh, Forgiven's a Greek and he's in the LEC, right? Like, everyone had an image of Forgiven that was the opposite of this. Forgiven just looks like a bitch right now. And anybody with any brain could see if you release statements like that and make this kind of move, that's what you'd be received as. And right now, just off the back of the G2 win, Forgiven's lost a lot of relevancy. If he doesn't do anything this week, it's pretty much over for him. Just even if you guys lose every single game after this, you've already done way better than they did with Forgiven. There's no reason for any organization to think that Forgiven is a really strong player in his own right, and there's definitely no reason for any organization to think Forgiven is a reliable player for them to try out. And if he wants to get into a top level team, obviously he can't do that right now. He didn't show that he is worthy of being a top level player, so he's only going to get low tier offers again. And every org that knows they're only going to be giving him like a low tier roster or a rookie roster knows that they can't have him for the sake of reliability, because he's not reliable anymore. So this is just a disaster on like every single front, and it's indefensible in that regard. I even have to address his gameplay to point out how indefensible it is.
Before I ask these two guys their take, I want to ask you one other question, Veteran, because we have to establish at the beginning, right? It's all well and good if people speculate on stuff or make educated guesses. In fact, I'll give you a great example before I ask you this question so you can see the way I've handled it in the past. Yeah. So there's a player in CSGO history who actually is very decorated. He's won 3 majors. His name is Flosher. He played for Fnatic. He's a Swedish player. And about 5 years ago, it'd be about 5 or 6 now, so there was a bunch of clips from real matches, including the major in CSGO, where they looked very suspicious. Like, some of them looked like, how could he know that the opponent was there? Or he made a very weird decision. And so, because a few months after that, someone actually did get banned who was a pro player for using cheats by the game itself, it's often been speculated by some that this player, who's a top pro, was a top pro, but he also cheated as well at a period in time and then stopped later. And what I always say is this, because especially as someone who's a journalist, I can't come out and just say he cheated unless I have evidence of it and I know it, or at the very minimum, I'd probably need, I would say maybe like 3 of his teammates independently to tell me. Then I would maybe feel comfortable saying I know he cheated. So I always describe it like this, and the distinction is key. I don't know that he cheated, Veteran. I just think he did. Now, do you see the very key distinction I made there? So the question I'm going to ask you now is this. You were implying heavily, and another number of other people were on Twitter, like, but you kept doing it from the veil of almost a joke, like, maybe G2 lost this game on purpose to make Forgiven look bad. Was that just a joke? Was that supposed to only be a joke? Or was some of that speculation that actually it's real? You think in any way, anything, even an unconscious element of them wanted to like just make Forgiven look stupid by losing the game right after he gets subbed? What was that about?
The only guy who would have the impetus to do that, or the reason to do that, didn't do it. He wasn't the reason that game was lost. That game was lost through the mistakes of players who will only ever care very, very deeply about themselves and their own progress over anything else. Perkz did not have a very good game. Obviously, he had a lot of impact on side lane, but a lot of the skirmishes that went against them happened because Perkz initiated it, and Perkz would initiate it in circumstances where there was always something better and more obvious to do on the map. Stuff like this can't be attributed to the guys who I think might have a vendetta against Forgiven. So I don't think G2 lost that game on purpose. I think if they wanted to lose the game on purpose, they would have saved the Sona top game for Schalke, but they didn't. That was a fine draft by them. It was very playable. They weren't the better team on that day. I really don't think that G2 intentionally threw that game by any means.
Just worth establishing, because obviously it's like a theory some people warn up out there. Right, yeah. Let's talk about this topic then, guys, from Schalke. Then we can get it out of the way. We can just talk about the good things in Schalke and the rest of LEC, get this bullshit out of the way. So it'll be much like Forgiven. It'll just be the first part of the thing, and then it'll just skip out at some point in time, like 3 weeks in, and then we'll go into the rest of the season. So, Odoamne, you were someone who obviously was a teammate of Forgiven's even in the past on H2K. Even in the meantime, before Forgiven came back, you were actually one of the teammates that spoke more highly of him and said, you know, even if he had a lot of problems and character flaws as a person, it was worth playing with him because he was a good player and you could sort of see your way past it. Give us your take on this whole thing, because if people don't know, coming into the split, part of the reason why all the Euphoria guys got memed on for putting you guys in like the A tier is because everyone behind the scenes heard was that actually Schalke was doing well in scrims. Like, it was looking good initially. You came in, obviously you lost all the first games, and then this whole Forgiven thing happened. So from your point of view, was there a bad environment within Schalke during this split? Were there big problems?
I mean, just to kind of start from the beginning, yeah, I mean, my opinion of Forgiven was pretty decent, I would say. A lot of people kind of like hated him, the guys that like worked with him in the past, but I always kind of had a decent relationship with him. I mean, he was kind of like difficult to work with and stuff, but it wasn't really unbearable, you know. It wasn't like he was being irrational and you just couldn't like reason with him and stuff like that, but it would get like difficult at times. So that's kind of like why I still thought that it could like work working with him together. And yeah, like I think scrims at the beginning when we first started playing were okay, but that's kind of to be expected when everyone just kind of shit at the beginning. No one has any fundamental
new rosters, yeah, of course.
Yeah, you kind of just, it's like, you know, you play solo queue as 5 people on like, you know, TeamSpeak or whatever. So it was kind of like that. So you would just like kind of steamroll over people and stuff like that. But once the other teams kind of got their fundamentals down and set in stone, that's kind of when we started falling behind, I think, for the split.
Okay. What about the issue? Was actually Forgiven himself a problem? Was it like, because there's the thing, you can spin it both ways. Either he himself was a problem, was contributing to it, or everyone else in the team was losing and they just didn't know he was just mentally going boom.
I mean, I would say that we had a lot of fucking issues. I mean, he was an issue, other people were issues and stuff, but it's like we had so many issues that, let's just put it like this, everyone kind of like came with his own set of problems, but not all of us were like part of the solution, you know? It's not like all of us were kind of trying to fix our own shit to kind of get out of the hole that we kind of like dug ourselves into. I mean, I think he was trying in his own way. I think his attitude and stuff was better than in H2K a couple of years ago. But I think his kind of like mentality and the stuff he wanted to do or like wanted to play didn't really like fit, and he didn't want to like sacrifice his like play style and, you know, like his persona, his legacy, his ego, all of this stuff to kind of you know, get the team out of the hole. He was kind of like sticking with his like persona to the end. He's like, I'm forgiven, I'm gonna push, you know. And even though the game kind of like changed, I mean, back in the day when he was in H2K and we were playing this style, it was like, you know, in 5 minutes you chunk the bot tower to like half HP, and then it's always this threat that if you just ignore him, the tower will die, you know. But right now the way it is like you chunk the bot tower, but the tower won't die for like another 10 minutes because that's just how the game is. And it's just, his style didn't work anymore, and he didn't really try to kind of like adapt his style into like something better, you know, or something more reliable. And he was kind of still playing his own game in like his own like selfish way, which I don't think is like that big of a problem. But it's like when our unit kind of had so many problems and he wasn't willing to become like part of the solution, you know, that's kind of like where this whole discrepancy thing kind of happened.
Okay, right, Veteran, this feels like a perfect, he's actually raised a classic Forgiven topic there that I think we can talk about, which is, right, Forgiven uses the angle where it's like, as long as he wasn't the worst player in the game, it's not his fault. So if he does things and he expects like the jungler to do something, or he expects people to peel for him in a team fight, or he expects that he can push all the time and people should play around that, his logic is, as long as that wasn't the worst move, then it's your fault for not doing what he expected. But one of the problems I have with that scenario is That isn't actually how AD carry has played at all in 2020. Like, he wasn't playing the meta champions. He wasn't good on the meta champions. He would just farm. He would expect people to he would expect people to peel for him, who by his own logic haven't peeled for him for the last 3 weeks. Like, at some point in time, you have to take responsibility yourself and say, I'm going to do within the reasonable set of circumstances I have what makes sense to win the game. You can't just play to some unattainable ideal and then just say, right, anything that doesn't work in the game, I'm going to blame my teammates for.
I think it's the unchanging aspect of Forgiven that would be a problem without him inherently causing the problem himself. The problem with Forgiven is that he's kind of a neutral aspect to atmosphere, in the sense that if your atmosphere is going badly, it will continue to go badly and he won't do anything about it. And if it's going positively, he at least won't turn it into a negative atmosphere. But as a result, Forgiven can never be like a solution in that regard. And like Odoamne says, he's not going to be the guy to kind of like take the L on this so that we can try a system that works out better for us right now, because we're a team that needs to be developing. He'll demand, like, he basically will demand everyone to play like a top tier player until they are a top tier player, right? So he's a rock in that sense, but that's not one. That's one that acts as a barrier to progress if you're doing badly right now, and it's not one that will be the thing that causes you to become positive in your progress, right? I think that's just the overall issue with him. Like, he can give some nice pre-game speeches on in Champ Select, but he can't really be like the leader in game or be the guy that will help everything move forward in a way that won't just specifically benefit his play style in the way that's always worked for him. Like the whole idea about you can't have like 2 perma pushing side lanes or something like that is currently being tested by both Rogue and G2. So maybe first you could do that, but that would require a lot of other things that Schalke need to be working on, and doing it from a standpoint where both side lanes are operating as you already do is not going to help the team develop. Like, the team needs to start getting the fundamentals down before they start getting with like the new shit that Rogue and G2 are doing, right? But Forgiven just wants you to take a bunch of fucking leaps, right? And he'll force you to do that because he himself will not be the one that changes. Whereas someone like Innaxe is probably more willing to do the things that would help everyone else develop. Like, Loic only just started playing. You know, you can see he's uncomfortable in the early game on stage, even if he has some pretty good mid game sometimes. But someone like that can't deal with the amount of intense pressure from minute one that Forgiven's going to output in lane, right?
Because this is another problem I've noticed in his whole career, which is just manifested in the most extreme way now, which is he has like this mad static way of thinking where when, like, in the same way as he himself in his mind is always good. At every point in history, forever, no matter what, no matter even if it's right now, he still thinks of himself as at the peak of his game and he can do anything he wants. If a player like lets him down, betrays him, I'm using air quotes when I say this because obviously this is a super subjective like description. As soon as someone does that, they're written off forever. So for example, the reason why he looks totally stupid as fuck now is because for what he said to even vaguely make sense, he desperately needed Schalke to lose every other game this split, and in fact look way worse than when they had him. So the fact that they already have beaten G2 makes everything he said stupid as fuck, because his static way of thinking was, right, even though I know as Forgiven, literally like 4 weeks ago or something, we could win scrims, we actually had like some upside, some of these players had potential. Because for 3 weeks they've been bad, I've now decided they can never be good, they're all trash, all of them are a problem, literally half the org has to be replaced, otherwise I'll never play another game, and it doesn't even matter, I'm being kicked out anyway because you're all shit anyway, right? If the very next game you beat the best team in the league, you were wrong. You must literally objectively admit you were wrong. Like, forget whether you could have been the person to turn it around. Forget what would have happened with you. You would just, that just shows you were a component in the problems that happened before, even if it's just from the angle that you just never thought it could improve and that you'd written everyone off.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the fundamental issue, right? Like, the narrative will now never be able to favor Forgiven. He'll have to start from square one, which means he'll have to change his entire mindset. Everything that we just discussed that he kind of does within a team won't really work out on the lower tier team, so he has to change all of that. And if you're starting from square one, we're talking like 2 years, maybe 3 years before he's back on like a top tier team, and by that point Forgiven will be 31. right? Like he's really fucked it now. Like he's really fucked it.
Like this is really, it's funny. I knew a lot of these problems existed in the past. It's just I haven't done content on it, so people don't think I knew. I think I had some rose-tinted glasses version of Forgiven. But I will say the thing about this particular incident now, and we'll wrap this topic in a second and move on to the LEC shit. But what I wanted to say was this: the thing that has made me really like change some of how I think of the past now of his career is when I look back. When I think back now to that H2K team he had. The idea he had the fucking gall to suggest that was a broken team where all the players there were fucking idiots and didn't know what they were doing and the coach didn't know what he was doing. It's like, that's the moment it makes me realise, looking back now, Veteran, this guy wouldn't know a fucking good teammate if they bashed him in the head with a fucking frying pan. The guy, by his logic, has never had good teammates, except, by the way, and this really shows how he doesn't hold his own ideals. If he's friends with you, you can be garbage like Unlimited and he'll say you're a fucking great player. Like, as long as you're friends with him, you can get away with anything. So what's mad is this guy was on some good teams, but you never know it if you listen to him. Every team was never up to his standards, never did shit the way he did. Like the idea like Prolly's a shit coach and Odoamne is just a bad top laner and Yankos, probably the best fucking jungler who wasn't Korean to ever play the game, wasn't good enough for him. Like at some point in time, like you're just projecting your own insecurities and flaws on everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, like, because this will be the last thing I say on this as well. But like, the reason why I don't think you can ever like publicly back Forgiven's decision in all of this is that Forgiven has essentially decided, and a lot of people do decide this every single day. And Forgiven's walked a tight line in deciding this in the past. We've always held him up as a different kind of person. He has become the kind of person where he's much more comfortable having an excuse for why he's not winning rather than winning. Right. Exactly. And if you are a fan out there of Forgiven and you're endorsing him while he made all of these statements, that is the mindset that you are propagating. And if that's what Forgiven was to you, and that is what you were genuinely supporting for the last half a decade, I feel really fucking sorry for you. I really do, but I'm never going to endorse that kind of mindset. It's never better to have an excuse for why you're not winning. It's always better to just try to stay in the game and try to get the win. Right? So,
I mean, but it's not even the excuse that he has an excuse for like all of that. But the thing is, his excuse was his teammates. You know, it's not like, like say I would fuck up, you know, and I died to gank. I would be like, yeah, I fucked up my wave. I shouldn't have pushed. Blah blah blah. My wave was in a shit spot, and I entered and I died. But if he fucks up and he like dies to something, it's like either support or jungle trolled him, because I mean, you know, like his reasoning is like he could 2v3 the gank, you know, and it's like, yeah, sure, you can 2v3 the gank if your support plays it perfectly as well. But say your support fucks up that gank 9 out of 10 times, and 9 out of 10 times you'll die to the 2v3. The thing is, next time he won't play it differently and say, okay, my support can't outplay the gank, so I have to play differently. He will just keep on doing it and be like, my support trolled me.
Yeah, I mean,
that's kind of like what I meant with like the thing that he's not part of the solution as well, because he could have just changed his mindset and kind of let his ego go and be like, yeah, whatever, I'm just gonna do this when it's needed. He just keeps on doing it, and it's still gonna be someone else's fault.
I mean, there are plenty of people who like there's this whole like idea of like the perfect game, and that like there's some form of analysis that is correct from the perspective that everyone should be playing properly, right? But after you spent a week in the team and quite clearly your support is not going to help you try to 2v3 every time, you don't have that excuse anymore of like, oh, I expected my support to be 2v3. You don't have that excuse. Like that doesn't work analytically, and that obviously has no actual practical implications. That's why it's fucking useless analysis, and that's why like especially on the point where Forgiven never exactly spoke super highly of the HUK 2016 lineup. He'll say it was the best lineup he was on, but he'll still say it was broken. That just strikes me now, not as someone who's seeking perfection, but as someone who is looking for an excuse for why they didn't win Worlds, you know, for why they didn't.
I mean, it's still funny, because out of that roster, he still calls me and Janko chokers every time he gets the opportunity.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that's what I always said. That was the killer for me, Veteran, was that, like, it's fine. Even the SK Gaming lineup had some flaws in it. Like, N-rated was a bit washed up at that point in time. Some of the players were, like, never going to be super duper ever, and a lot of them didn't even continue their pro careers. But, like, that was the breaking point, like I say, was the HUK lineup. Because if I'm Forgiven, right, as you said, the person we all thought he was in terms of, like, all the great... Because what was clever was a lot of his negative qualities have, like, a positive spin to them. Like, he is really driven. He does want to be the absolute best player. He believes it's possible to be. These are all things that can be very good in a star player. But the problem is, those excuses, like if you're making excuses like, oh, but Reckless had this, it's like the excuses have to stop when you get that H2K lineup. Like, though, you've got the Reckless teammates right there. Like, so Reckless has been in teams that were worse than that. And being comparably as good. So, like, at some point, the buck has to stop with you eventually, you know? Like, you have to take some of the responsibility for the results, live or die, whether or not people played perfectly or not. Come on.
I mean, also on that lineup, and on the idea that, like, Odo and Jankos are chokers, you know, like, Odo and Jankos weren't perfect, but I do think Odo was actually the best performing player that we had at that World Championships, and not just because you're on the show right now, but, like, I think everyone was pretty much in agreement that that was probably some of your best top lane performance ever, on massive carry champions as well, not even like the Malkine shit everyone used to associate with you. But Jankos had problems on that team. And you could even say that Jankos had mental problems on that team. But Jankos has worked through them, gotten better, and has now won an MSI and been a world.
He was also a straight fire jungler at the same time. That was like his one big flaw. You know, like it's not like he didn't bring anything to the table.
He was a straight fire jungler up to a point. And Forgiven was at that time a straight fire ADC up to a point. It's just that Jankos has developed beyond that point now, right? And Forgiven is still finding excuses for being at that point. So at this point, I don't think he can throw those kinds of stones at his old teammates anymore.
I mean, all the teams you're like in are like dysfunctional. Like even with the HTK one, like we were kind of like good individually, but we had problems, you know. But it comes down to the same thing. It's like how many players from that roster were willing to be part of the solution and try to like change their play styles to kind of like fit for the greater good. And me and Jankos were doing it. And yeah, I mean, sometimes you would int and stuff, but it was just like, he wasn't really like, I'd never seen Forgiven just kind of like change his style, you know, like in that HTK lineup at one point, I think all of our jungle paths would start to top and then to bot at 230 to like cover everything that could possibly go wrong on bot and just facilitate Forgiven to carry as much as he can. But then we're still called out for being like chokers or like bad teammates and stuff like that when we're legit. I think everyone from that roster kind of like sacrificed themselves for the greater good except him.
I mean, like, if we're talking about this point, like, you remember what it took to, like, actually get Forgiven back in there, right? Like, Forgiven had to stay with me and Richard at our apartment the whole time, and he was scrimming from there. And, like, we took massive steps to integrate Forgiven back in a way that will work for everyone. And then once we were all winning again, then Forgiven was integrated back with everyone at the World Championships and everything was fine there. But we took massive steps there. And even on, like, the jungle pubing thing he said, I remember the first scrim review where Polly was just going over, like, these are our paths to bot in all these circumstances. And afterwards, I actually said to Polly, like, wait, I thought that if lanes were like this, we were supposed to be doing this instead. And he was like, Forgiven's just not going to let us do that. Right? Like, at that point, we were all behind the scenes just doing this. You remember when we finally got into play Callista? And Polly, like, made a separate group chat with all of us. Yes, but Polly made a separate group chat with all of us and was like, Forgiven's going to play Callista today, but don't say anything when he picks it, right? We had to do all of this stuff to do workarounds around Forgiven. Forgiven was worth it back then, though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He can't act as if he is still like an S-tier player where if everybody does everything in this regard, it takes top-tier players to make Forgiven work. I don't think he realizes that, right? And he's never willing to scale that back, and he can't not be willing now to scale back and then also blame everyone else around him. Everyone else around him has made significant sacrifices for years and years and years on his behalf and being the staunchest defenders. The least he could do is fucking stay and own it and actually grind, right? But he's not even willing to do that. Then why should everyone else make the effort, you know?
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Well said,
right,
I guess.
Let's move on then, right? Innaxe. Yeah. Obviously, that was a bit awkward. There was not really any way you could jump in there.
I'm just learning, you know. I'm a new guy.
What about this? Right, being as when you came into Schalke, obviously it looked like everything was at its absolute worst. They lost all the games. I mean, in theory, one of the big names of the team's just left. He's left in this like really ominous way that makes everything sound like it's a dumpster fire. Right, from your perspective, what has it been like coming into Schalke, and what has had to change to allow some of the results we've just seen to happen?
I mean, just to quickly correct Veteran, I did scrim before Forgiven left, but the reason wasn't that I was outperforming or the team wanted it. The first reason was he had media day, and I had to play 5 games that day. And the second reason was I actually had to sub in because, I had to sub in. That's all I can say for one game. For one game. I wasn't like there wasn't like a decision like, oh, we're gonna split scrim time with Innaxe and try him out, and I was really happy to play the scrim sets, but it wasn't like the change wasn't coming in like as like premeditated in a sense, you know.
No, basically, for people who can't translate that, you just have to have 5 people in a server to play a game of League of Legends. So that's how Innaxe got in the game. So, see what I did there? Right, go ahead and give us some thoughts on the team itself, though, and some of the how things have improved.
For the LEC team, or like my story, like how I came in, or how it was for me.
You can give us some background if you want. Yeah, how did you come and get in this team entirely?
I mean, I just came off of Worlds. I was going through offers, and obviously I thought that the Schalke one was by far the best. Not like sorry, I say that, but I actually say it a lot. I had some other offers as well, and I don't know, the Schalke lineup on the academy I thought was really talented, especially my mid jungle. I knew that my support was good, and that's pretty much all I can ask for from a team. And I also the fact that Forgiven was on the main team, it was kind of like not double-edged, but I without like being BM, he is like high risk because he's coming in from 3 years retirement, right?
Yeah, of course.
I thought that with the way I'm developing, that Schalke would also want a reserve player in a sense that in case things go wrong, they also have me who's like ready to play, can perform, stuff like this. So I thought it was my best shot at getting LEC and also improve.
By the way, a very smart move because for people who don't know, Forgiven has never actually completed 2 full splits with any team in the history of League of Legends. So you actually picked your career path perfectly there, man. That was actually genius. You were like those guys in like NASCAR who just drift behind the leading car, knowing eventually they'll get a chance to overtake. Like you played that perfectly. Well done.
I mean, I didn't really know the 2 splits thing because, like I said, I actually only started watching competitive, I think, like just before a H2K Worlds run, and I don't even remember. Like, I'm completely new to the scene, like relative to you guys. So
I have one question though. If you're going to say that right now, you've just placed it that you only started watching just before, right? Here's the question that you have to answer about Forgiven Innaxe. The only one that you are obliged to answer this whole episode. After all the shit that went down, after all the stuff with his teammates, you're replacing him, then you win this massive game that makes him look really foolish, right? You're making it like, I didn't even really know who this Forgiven guy was. Why did you literally do his fucking gesture of like the shh thing, which obviously added 10 times more salt into the wound? Like that sounded like you did know about Forgiven. I'm just saying.
I obviously I use Twitter as well, just like any sports player. So I mean, it wasn't BM. It wasn't like anything.
It was a bit BM. Come on.
It was a banger. That's what it was.
And it was good. Listen, it was straight fire. I can't lie. It was a bit BM though.
I can see why it's BM, but my intention wasn't that. Obviously, I knew that if I did that, like people would think that I'm BMing him. But literally, the reason is, and you guys will laugh, but literally the reason is, I'm a complete random, and I need the Twitter clout for my brand.
Fair enough. Okay, that's a good answer. That's a good answer.
I'm not even joking. I just did it because I thought it would like put my name in the spotlight. So
no, you were right.
Obviously, if it seemed BM, that was not my intention at all.
I think it worked in part because of that. Don't worry, mate. No one's criticizing you for it. Here's
the thing.
Well timed.
In light of the fact that from the Forgiven side, that this thing's become like a fucking Shakespearean tragedy, the fact that they then win against the best team, for you to then do that gesture is also just the perfect ending to that chapter of his career. Really. Like, let's just move on at this point, boys. We can just leave it there.
I'm also just imagining, because he said that he watched in 2016, he started in 2016, that like one of the first series he watched was that Forgiven 2016 series where he does that or something. It's like full circle
I have really bad memory, so I don't know exactly when I started watching. I just remember I was watching Reckless, there was Forgiven, there was stuff like this, and I was like, oh man, these guys are so good. I wish one day I could be as good as them, That's like the typical gold player or whatever diamond player mentality. That's when I was getting into it. So, but I mean, the way I came in from Academy is, I don't know, I just came in, and we also had a few issues in Academy, even though we were undefeated 6-0. We also had a lot of issues actually in Academy, but I don't know, like slowly we started fixing them, and obviously Dylan would help us as well. And like everyone just had the same goal, we just wanted to win EU Masters. We just wanted to get to ADC. So there's not like there's not really anything big or anything explosive going on in academy team, so it was really calm for me. We just had goals that we had to follow and reach, and help each other and stuff like this. But when I came into the main team, the atmosphere was just, I don't know. I remember Odo. Like I was just afraid. I was afraid to ask or talk to Odo because, like, when we were starting the scrim, when we had the day meeting, like interviews, it just seemed like everyone seemed so down. Especially Dreams. Like, I don't know. I just felt like Dreams was depressed, and the atmosphere was so bad compared to academy. So obviously, I'm a vocal guy. I'm kind of like, I wouldn't say I'm like bubbly, but I try to like bring everyone up and like keep like reminding people that just because you've lost 6 games doesn't mean that your life is over, But obviously I didn't have like big speeches.
If only Forgiven could have said that. Fucking hell. You just nailed it immediately, mate. If you said that.
It's not that easy in that
They probably loved you immediately.
Like, I don't know, I just tried to like get a feel of like how people are feeling, or like how tilted people are, and then slowly, like as we won more games, I think we had like a 13 game win streak, I think, in scrims until like yesterday or today, and I don't know, like the mood just got a lot better. But at the start, it was really hard for me to read the room and see like, is Aldo actually tilted? Is Ava
that room was really a dumpster fire when you came in, by the way.
Yeah.
Imagine you're coming in and it's 0-6 and we're losing scrims and stuff, and it's just a shit show where everyone's blaming each other. So welcome to the team.
Yeah, it was a good one. It was a good one. But I didn't feel that out of place, because like, I don't know, I think the team is actually like good mechanically for sure, and I think the team can work. So I didn't come in here like with the mindset that, okay, I've got this chance to play ADC. I'm just gonna fucking KDA stat farm, just look good and be like, yeah, I played LEC and I was doing good on a bad team. So I didn't want to do anything like this. I actually just wanted to win. Like that was my only goal, and it's the same in academy. I just want to win, like whether it's games, whether it's E-Masters or get to playoffs. That's all I want to do. So I was just trying to like fix the atmosphere, obviously focus on myself as well, and try to help people, especially the Dreams. And well, it's a lot better now. I'm sure Aldo can tell about that.
Yeah, I mean, mostly when Innaxe came in, it's like he was a guy that wanted to be part of the solution, so kind of like honeymoon started, where you're like, okay, guys, fresh start, blah, 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 kind of start from scratch and try to forget about the problems and stuff. So it kind of like worked, when he came in, everyone kind of became more, how do I say this, more tolerant of each other and like mistakes and stuff, because it finally felt like we were working together to fix our shit, So it was like, if you don't want to like improve and stuff like that, like kind of like the atmosphere that was before, that we weren't like kind of like in this unity working together to like improve, it's just like, okay, who are we gonna blame this time? Who fucked up the most this game, and let's throw him under the bus and just keep on going like that, So it was like when he came in, that whole attitude kind of changed, and it was like we kind of started having like this discourse, where we can actually address a lot of issues and kind of like rationally go through each and every one of them and make sure that they don't happen for like the next time, So it just kind of like the honeymoon, when it started, it kind of like felt good and made us kind of get over the slump, I guess, that we were in.
Okay. Right, Veteran, to get your take on the Schalke team, one thing I want to say as well, which does tie into also why I was actually shocked that Forgiven presented it as such an extreme set of circumstances in Schalke, is it's not like every game was like, right, the team begins at level 1, they're losing, they just lose from pillar to post, they never had a chance, shit team, every player's bad. Like, that doesn't even make sense, because there was a couple of games early in the split, they were actually like having leads in the game that they just misexecuted. They had a couple of bad drafts. Forgiven himself couldn't play some of the meta champions. Like I said, there was actually a lot of things that could have been worked on, could have been fixed. Then you throw in that the most obvious player who was getting all the criticism, justifiably, was the jungler, a player who never has been elite tier anyway in LEC. So if you change a jungler, that already can radically change any team. Like, I'm actually surprised that people saw this as like a complete write-off as a team. They did look like the worst team in LEC, but the difference is the other bad teams have no reason to ever be better. Like there were problems that could be solved here, right?
Yeah, I mean, there were some ridiculously close games that they had. Basically, every time Odoamne got Aatrox, the game ended up being way closer than it should, and that might just be the strength of the champion. But also, Odoamne was playing very consistently, especially in laning phase. Abadage got ahead in a couple of the games. Like there was a 4-0 LeBlanc game, there was a 4-0 Cassiopeia game, and Forgiven himself, like, actually was not like running it down every game or anything. Obviously the Fnatic game is stuck in people's heads, and then the Mad Lions game where they got like the Giga freeze off on him on bot side while you guys are diving top side perma. Like those are the games that people remember when it comes to Forgiven. Those are the only games people remember about you now, Forgiven, by the way. But overall, like, if there was a big issue, it would be closing it out in mid to late game scenarios. Not everyone appeared to be on the same page all the time. It was very difficult to identify what kind of a team Schalke was. You can look at Misfits or Origin and call them like a 1-3-1 team, right? Mad Lions went from being like, we're just going to rush neutrals as 5 permanently, to now being like that, we're going to set up on 2 lanes team that they always were. Rogue are a very fluid team. G2 are a very fluid team, but they have very distinct setups per game that they do. It was very difficult to put Schalke in any of that. If any of that place, they seemed a bit directionless. And on that perspective, Lurox was actually not a bad upgrade, because the best parts of Lurox in the academy team were actually when it came to reacting to mid-game map states. He was actually very good at capitalizing opportunities there. He was never like an exceptional early game jungler or anything like that. Shinkrov would take that for me in the Prime League setup, but I do think Lurox was better than anyone but Shinkrov in Prime League, I have to say that. I think when it comes to early game, the honestly probably the worst early game you guys had was actually against Rogue this weekend. But that was like a once in every 30 games fuck up. That's probably never gonna happen again, which was the bot lane thing, right? The level 2 thing. But overall, yeah, they've just had issues kind of closing on these that they already had. So if the fix with Innaxe is a fix on like attitude and atmosphere and mental and all stuff that actually does promote team play and promote trust between players, they can become a more decisive team. And once they are a more decisive team, you can start actually working on those decisions themselves, right? Because you have enough smart people on the team. You just need to start figuring out how to close it and figure out as 5 how to close it. Like the way you close the G2 game was a bit of a fucking mess, right? But eventually they won't be a mess, and you guys all trust each other now. It seems a lot better in there, so you have a framework that you can start building off from. It's probably one of the best like 0-7 teams that we've ever seen in the LEC, to be honest. It's just been filled with so much drama. No one's really called them that yet. You certainly look a lot better than Vitality, but Vitality's issues were a lot less avoidable than yours.
I mean, being the best 0-7 team is... I can't really imagine that's something to be proud of, you know?
Innaxe, you're not on a 0-7 team. You're on a 1-1 team, okay?
That's
Don't
true.
forget that, all right?
I'm part of the loser gang. I'm the one enjoying the ride here. Oh. But yeah, like, I mean, based on, like, also to kind of, like, expand on what you said, Veteran, I mean, for us, what works best now is that Innaxe is kind of like a vocal player, and he kind of brings this voice on, like, you know, because the way it works is like usually you're like 1-3-1, you know, and you have the bunch of 3 guys on mid that are just like trying to contest the wave and walk around, and they're kind of like the ones setting the direction on the map. And I think he does a really good job because he's really vocal. He's like really creative and really, just creative about it on like what we can do and all of this stuff, which is kind of like an upgrade over Forgiven, because Forgiven wasn't really like this talkative guy that to set up like plans in motion, you know, while Innaxe is willing to do this. And that's kind of like why I would say that our mid game now is a bit better. We have a bit more direction, because like the Rogue game was really fucked from early game. We kind of just like entered and then we lost and whatever. But the G2 game, it was, we didn't really close out properly because we are still like not at the level where like really good, you know, to just close out super clean and all of this stuff. But those 2 games, even in like the contrast between like a win and a loss, had a lot more direction, I would say, than you know, the games previous to this.
I have to ask then, did you not have a vocal element in the 3-man in the 1-3-1 before then? Like, was Dreams or Gilius, was Gilius not vocal and that's why he got removed in place of Lurks? Is Lurks not being vocal enough, or?
I mean, Gilius was kind of vocal, but sometimes he wouldn't be on like the correct side where he needed to be.
Okay.
And Dreams is kind of like vocal, but I would say he's kind of like planning too much in ahead. You know, he's not like what I mean, like what Innaxe does. I think he wants to do things in the moment. You know, like we're like, okay, we get
He's
prior
decisive.
here. Yeah, it's decisive. He's like, we get prior here, and he's like, okay, I want to do this, and we go here and do this. You know, while with Dreams, he's more of a like, okay, we're gonna get prior here, and then we're gonna go top side, get control, stuff like this. You know, which is kind of like fine for the big picture to have a guy that's kind of like sets the tone of the map and what you want to do, but then you don't have a guy that's kind of like microing people, you know, when like, because for example, when I group with the team, like when I get my silent push and I walk with the gang of 4, when we become like a bigger gang, I like micro everyone. We're like, let's walk here, let's do this, I want to contest here, I want to do this, I want to do that, you know. While before with Forgiven, it was like the only call was like this thing where we're like, we're gonna push mid and we're gonna control top side, you know. Which is like fine, you know, but this doesn't really give you room to be creative on what's a good fight, what's a bad fight, if you want to contest this, if you want to do that, you know. And Innaxe kind of like contributes to this, because when they're like only a gang of 3 now, they actually have more direction and they're more decisive on what skirmishes are good and what's there to control and all of this stuff.
Even though I know he just means like as a synonym for the word group, just saying gang just sounds hilarious. So it's like, yeah, I've got my gang with me, like the boys are back in town. It's like, you know, I know what you mean. I know that makes it a 1v1 seem way more baller though. Exactly.
We have a meme in Schalke now when there's like 3 people coming to my lane to dive me, or 4 people are coming. It's like the boys are coming.
There we go.
That's the meme right now. That's hot at the moment in the Schalke house.
That's pretty good. And let's be real, in your games, the boys will come in a lot.
Yeah, the boys are there.
They never stop coming.
No, they're my bros now.
Innaxe, do you have any idea how rare it is for the AD carry to be the leadership guy in game?
Yeah, I know. I had a talk with Sheepy a few months ago in Unicorns, because I felt like I was talking too much, and I knew that players like Upset and Reckless don't shot call or don't try to shot call.
Upset does. Upset calls a lot.
Really?
In Schalke last year, he was kind of like having the same role as you, where he's mid lane and he's like calling, I want to contest this, I want to do this, I want to do that, you know?
Because I was hearing that he doesn't really call that much, and I was kind of like I was kind of like not making excuses, but I thought that, if you don't focus on shot calling, you can focus on being a better AD carry and being good mechanically and being good at team fighter. So that's what I talked to Sheepy about. And I was like, oh man, I don't really want to shot call. You know, I just want to focus and be like the best like team fighter or whatever. And he just told me like, it doesn't like you don't need to like label or put yourself in like categories. You just have to do what your team needs to do to win. And that's kind of the mindset I have afterwards, because if my team doesn't have a shot caller, then I kind of have to step up, right? But if my team does, then I have to actually talk less, which is kind of what's happening in Schalke, because sometimes I talk too much. But I'd rather have like too much talking than no talking, in a sense.
Yeah,
of course.
Because you can fix that. You can easily fix too much talking, right?
Yes.
But too little talking is really, really fucking hard.
Put it this way, I'll give you a great example, because this is something actually that I was talking about on a CSGO broadcast last week, because the person who does analysis with me used to be an in-game leader, and in CS, as the name implies, that's the person who decides everything. They're the shot caller, the tactician, all that. And he said when we were, because one of the interesting things about this tournament, unlike other tournaments in CSGO, is we could actually listen to the comms channels of the teams playing the game. So we could actually hear all the calls they were making. And one team had really messy comms. Like everyone was talking all the time, talking over each other, saying like useless information. And he made the point that like, while it's really easy to look at that and say like, there's obviously a problem there, that is way better than the comms where no one's talking, because the difference is talking is doing something. Like you're actively trying to solve problems. You're trying to give information. You can easily go to some of those guys and just tell them, listen, in place X, don't do it as much, or in place Y, do it more. It's way harder to get the guy who doesn't comm at all and explain to him from step one why he should even comm, when he should, like, it's just going to be way harder. So I agree with you. It's a lot easier to reduce it a little bit than it is to increase someone else. That's way harder.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think this Sorry. At the same time, I think this whole thing with like AD carries shouldn't shot call or can shot call is like the biggest bitchy excuse ever, because it's like
yes.
Like I'm a top laner, or like imagine you're a mid laner and you legit need to manage your wave, think about enemy jungler, think about your jungler, think about like so many things. While on AD carry, you have a support doing all of that for you. And if you ask an AD carry, or most of the AD carries to be like, hey, you should call this more, and he's like, nah, bro, I have to focus on my lane. And it's like the biggest lazy excuse ever. It's just like you don't have the skill to talk or like manage people. That's just it. There's no shame in that.
Put it this way, even though it became almost a meme, when Doublelift used to play on TSM and people used to say, he's one of the shot callers, like, listen, I won't say how I know this, but I know that wasn't the case. He wasn't like the main guy shot calling. But the difference is, what he was doing, which people interpreted as shot calling, is he took responsibility for the fact that if the game wasn't set up the way he wanted it, he would just tell people to do it, as opposed to just expect them to know to do it. Because he obviously realised, if someone else wasn't figuring it out, I should contribute at least some in that sense, because how can I, at the end of the game, otherwise then say, you should have done it like this? It's like, well, you didn't say anything. It's like, well, I shouldn't have to. It's like, every role has to let other people know what they need and what they're going to do in the game. Come on.
I mean, this whole AD carry thing, so what you heard about Upset not being like a shot caller used to be true. Like when he was initially on Schalke, that did used to be true. And that's because Upset, like a lot of young AD carries at that point, had the idea that the Miffy/Sven setup was the optimal setup, where the support does all of that and the AD carry focuses on mechanics, etc. What they don't realize is that the reason Sven Miffy was like that is because initially, you wouldn't know now, but like for the first 3 weeks that Sven was on Origin and Scrims, it literally took 3 weeks before I heard him say more than 2 words in like a 6-hour span. Then you couldn't stop him talking, but Miffy was always the dominant voice there, and everyone respects Miffy in a very specific way. And Upset always kind of wanted a support for a while that was like that. Upset probably then just grew up and realized eventually that he can't just expect everyone to do all of this all the time, and if he actually wants to start winning, he should take up some of this himself. But it was taking that kind of trial and error process before AD carries came into learning that. The fact that you're already doing that in Innaxe is rare because of a fault with other AD carries, and it's actually a massive positive with you, because a lot of the best supports don't actually talk very much. I'm not saying you need to get rid of your current support, but I am saying if you ever wanted someone like Mickey X, you're going to have to talk for him, because a lot of the supports don't actually do the Miffy kind of role, right? So you're actually helping out your future in a massive way here. And it's really good that you weren't kind of stuck in the rut that I saw a lot of other young AD carries stuck in. Like there was never really an excuse for that. Even Sven himself calls a lot more now in TSM, as far as I know.
C9, but yeah.
Oh, fuck yeah, C9. I mean, I don't watch that irrelevant region. I don't care.
Okay, dude.
It's all right. It's all right. You styled it out. Right, let's talk about some other teams, though, because obviously the team you beat, we've already got out of the way that Veteran doesn't think they threw the game. But G2 going 0-2 is obviously big news, because until that, they looked like they couldn't lose a game. I'll even say, to be fair, even in this game that they played against Schalke, yeah, you can definitely blame Schalke for not closing it out, but G2 was making it fucking hard. They were doing a good job in that game, considering how far they were behind Veteran.
Yeah, I mean, well, they were actually ahead initially, but, okay. It's really weird. So the whole game went really bad for G2, like basically on the level 3 bounce back on both mid and bot, because of some absurd reason, despite the fact that he knew he had a TP disadvantage in bot lane and you had just backed, Perks decided that even though Cassie is literally on like 200 HP and there's absolutely no way of coming up to the wave and I just fucking won the lane here, decided to go fucking ham on the Cassio. And that obviously went fucking bad because you TP'd in and executed him. With you had Sheen on that because you have first blood bot, right? Like,
yeah, I think I had double kill or something.
Yeah. That's something that G2 abused against Fnatic the weekend before. So G2 quite clearly do know how to keep track of all of these things. They just didn't at that point. And then they still kind of got ahead anyway towards mid-game. But then their map setups became like... when Perks was doing like his god tier split pushing that everybody was like creaming over, but honestly a lot of the times when he was on side or forcing something around his side lane, he was actually in like the wrong map setup. Like Baron would be about to spawn and it would be in a situation where G2 were already technically ahead on the map, and instead of going for Baron control or anything like that and trying to set up like that, Perks would decide this is the perfect time to start a skirmish around blue buff, and then everything would collapse, right? Obviously it's not just Perks playing badly, It's just that Perks did like cancel, and a lot of people thought that Perks like was really angry with his team or something. Perks was complicit in the start of a lot of these fights that went really south for them. And credit to you guys, every time you recognized that this fight was a bad fight from them, you immediately collapsed and you immediately took advantage of it and capitalized on it. But Perks' split push was actually kind of inefficient at a lot of points, even though there were some points where it was really, really nice. Wonder didn't have a very good game either, and he doesn't have the excuse of I picked top lane Sona, so I am obviously trolling this whole game. In that game, he was on fucking Ornn, which takes 50 years to kill for some absurd reason, is never getting hotfixed. In fact, I actually just got buffed on this patch with the Sunfire shit. But I think you could say G2 threw game at points, but there are plenty of teams that wouldn't have capitalized on it properly. They never intentionally threw anything, was obviously my argument. It's just that their play was quite clearly suboptimal here. And credit to Schalke, like every time that they gave them an opportunity, they fucking took it, right? They fucking took it.
I mean, to be honest, I didn't really feel like their split push was that annoying, or like that threatening, because I felt like what you said about their setup being kind of poor is like, yeah, they were start split push, but we were never in the position where we're like, oh, we have to do this now, else this guy's just going to end the game or take our base. It felt like every time we were taking free objectives or stuff, they're just going to try to like salvage the situation by starting some weird split push where they're going somewhere, It didn't really feel like they were like threatening us and stuff like this, they were just kind of like doing their best to salvage the situation. I think they did really good because, I mean, their map play was really good considering the fact that they were just losing fights over and over again.
I mean, the way that they were doing it was like if Perks did have pressure on bot, then his team would group around him on bot and try to start a fight in the jungle around him. And if Perks didn't have pressure on his side lane, that would be the time when his team would just fucking Ornn ult engage on the other side of the map when Perks can't possibly get anything. And that's why you saw Perks fucking ulting waves to tower so often, was because he was basically never in a position to actually pressure when they started taking a split map fight, right? And you guys didn't have to respond to them yet. So like, I agree with you guys. The general feel of it right now for people is that Perks was really, really annoying that game, but because of the way they were playing it out, it really couldn't have actually been annoying to you guys, and you guys recognized that at a lot of points. So
what about like, obviously the interesting thing about this split at the moment is just the standings alone make it look super stacked. Like all these teams have gotten like interesting wins over each other, and at the moment it's like you've got the established teams that people thought would be good, Origin, Fnatic. We'll leave G2 out, that goes without saying, but then you have all these other teams around them. I mean, I guess you could maybe put Rogue in that latter group. Then you've got the Mad Lions and Misfits side, basically. So, right, here's the thing. When I did the crackdown earlier with I Will Dominate, we basically made Bwipo pick which of these teams is legit and which of the teams are not going to like last. Now, he did the fairly obvious one, which is he just picked the established players, OG Fnatic, to make it, and then he picked the Misfits and the Mad Lions teams to drop off because it's the rookies and the meta might switch, etc. So what way would you guys come down on this one? Like, what of this pack of teams, which ones are legit? Which ones seem like it's maybe just nice schedule, or they just had a nice start to the split?
I mean, I guess, OG Fnatic G2 goes without saying, but I think out of, who else is there? Misfits, Rogue, Mad Lions.
Yes.
And that's it, I guess. I mean, Rogue is weird, because Rogue at the beginning of the split, everyone would say that they're like super insane, they're going to be the best and blah, 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 because they went like 7-11 and they made playoffs and they beat Splice, so everyone thought they're like top 3 team in EU or stuff like that. I mean, I think I actually don't know what to think about them, because I would have said at the beginning that they're going to make it and they're going to be a good team, but right now they're kind of sort of inconsistent with their wins and all of this stuff. So I'm not sure, because they have the potential, if they fix their shit, that they can be really insane and start threatening taking games off of the top teams and all of this stuff. But Mad Lions and who else is there?
Misfits.
Mad Lions, Misfits. I mean, it looks like Misfits is just 2v8 job where Razor and Unforgiven are just taking over the games and everyone else is just kind of like spectating. So I think they might end up dropping when everyone else kind of like fixes their fundamentals. But right now, Razor and Unforgiven are really smurfing it. And Mad Lions, it just feels like they're this group of like players that just have like good teamwork, but their individual skill is not really that great, I would say. Like Shadow is inting half the time, and sometimes he's having this like insane leaf flanks where he's carrying the game. So it's kind of like inconsistent on that aspect. Like the only star players that I would see on Mad Lions are Karzi and maybe Humanoid when he has good games. But I think if I had to choose between all of these three, I would choose Rogue to kind of like stay in the top 4 and the other 2 dropping.
Okay, that's pretty bold considering where the other teams are. Right, what do you come down this Innaxe?
I haven't really seen that many of the games because I was kind of scrimming double, so I didn't really have that much time to watch the games as a spectator. I kind of just only watch the Pro Vs of AD carries and try and learn.
Maybe give us some thoughts on the AD carries from these teams then. Who's good? Who do you like?
I think I watch a lot of Reckless and a bit of Karzi actually recently, and I think he's good for sure, but I don't think he's as good as people say. I think he can be good eventually, but I don't think he's like the super rookie that everyone is calling for. And I watched a few of Caps's Pro Views, and I was really not impressed. Obviously, I, as Innaxe, cannot really flame Caps, but as an AD carry, I can say that he has a lot of issues that he also has to work on. Like,
can you give us a few of them?
I don't know. I was just watching like his laning on Senna, and I was just mind blown on like the really simple mistakes that even I shouldn't do. You know, like walking up and pretty much getting Rakan W'd into Zyrakan with Tom Kench. I don't know. Like I thought that Caps would also be the perks when he started off, and I would be like really mind blown by how good perks was on AD carry after he roll swapped, but it just didn't have that feel. So maybe I had like too high expectations in a sense. But as you can see, like Caps on AD is kind of becoming an issue for them. Even though he's like really good player, he's really, really good. I think that I don't exactly know the biggest problem with him, but something's not working for sure with G2.
Okay.
And I mean, the game against us, I can say that they underperformed for sure, but I also think that we didn't play as well as we can, especially like as well as we do. But I think otherwise AD carries, I mean, I wouldn't really like rank them, but for sure top 3 would be Reckless, Upset. What's the third? I really need a list of the ADs.
Patrick and Sammer.
Kazi.
Yeah, I assume you remember Kazi.
We're not putting Caps in, I'd assume. So
I would actually put Hans as well, because I think he's really, really good. But for some reason, I don't feel the same pressure that I feel from like Upset or Reckless, as well in solo queue. But even before the split, I don't know. But I think that's the top 3 for me, and then the rest is kind of like whatever. Okay. I can't really like get like a good opinion of them. From what I'm watching, and team-wise, I think just off like players and how I feel about them, I think top 4 should be at the end of the split: G2, Fnatic, Origin, and either Rogue, Misfits, or Mad Lions, like one of these. I also agree with Aldo that the Rogue, I thought they would be a really insane team, because obviously they swapped Woolite for Hans Sama, and they have like a really solid lineup. But even in the game, I know it looked really rough for us, but I didn't really feel the pressure that I was supposed to feel from a team of that caliber, you know?
Okay.
Even though we really ran it down bot lane with Dreams and the gank and everything, the fact that they almost threw the game, and like I don't know, I just didn't feel the same pressure that I expected to feel from Rogue and from Scrims as well. But that would be the top 4, and then I think bottom teams, not including us, would be Vitality and SK, which is kind of obvious, right, for everyone.
Yeah, it's all right. You can leave that part, right? There's a lot we can go off there, Veteran. There's a lot of good talking points. So let's actually go with the Caps one, because there's one thing that I can say is a fairly bold statement, but I don't really know how anyone can argue with it. Right, this notion that looked like it was true for the first 3 weeks of like, wow, these G2 guys released our geniuses, they can roll swap 20 roll. No, Perks can roll swap 20 roll. There's what I've learned about G2. I have no evidence that any of the others could roll swap to any other role and still be a world-class player, because that's the point. The actual expectation that you're going to roll swap like Perks did last year, that's a blue moon scenario. Like, it's very rare anyone's going to be amazing at doing that. And I even look at the rest of the split, Veteran, now, and I start thinking to myself, wait a minute, So Wonder has played 1 game of Sona and 3 games of Soraka in a league where, like, that's as many games as the entire rest of the league had played of Soraka. Like, they were even propping this guy up as an ADC. Like, and then before the 0-2 week, he had that game on Senna, who I think it was against Fnatic maybe, where he just literally inted in lane on his own, right ahead of his ADC, of his support, just went up and got wrecked over the wall by the Lee Sin. And then he has a 0-2 week where he is the only AD carry in the world to make a Aphelios look like it doesn't need any hot fixes. Like, this is a bad scenario, Veteran. Come on, you got to come in on this. Man.
I actually, genuinely, like, I mean, this sounds really weird to say. I genuinely think Caps doesn't understand Rakan's ranges. I don't think he can play against a champion. I genuinely think that. Like, when he brought up Rakan, that watching the pro view, and that he's just randomly getting Rakan W'd for no reason. It's like, yeah, like every time I've watched Caps play against Rakan, I genuinely think he doesn't understand the champion. It's probably a champion you should play more. Perks understands it because he played it. He used to spam it mid. I don't know if you know that. Okay. He actually used to spam it mid with Dark Harvest and solo queue last year. So Perks understands his champion. But I genuinely think he has a problem playing against it. Innaxe, by the way, you're probably the only AD carry in Europe that can shit on Caps right now, live in front of everyone. You're probably the only one who can do that right now. If anyone can do that, it's actually you.
I don't think anyone can shit on Caps. Like, even if he plays bad, let's say he plays bad on AD this split, this guy is like one of the best players Europe has had, and I don't want to say anything bad about him. Like, I have mad respect for him.
He should go and play fucking mid lane, shouldn't he? Like,
yes, exactly.
It's not my fault he swapped roles, is it? Fucking hell.
I think he can be good. Like, I've watched actually a few of his pro views, because I thought that when people role swap, like from Perks, I actually learned a lot of like different like stuff that you wouldn't normally learn from other ADs, like how he uses like Xayah feathers to create zones in lane, and how he manages cooldowns. It's like a mid laner's thought process, right? Mm-hmm. And when you get this into an AD carry and you can like implement it to your own gameplay, it's pretty good. But
how is that different from ADC though? Like, what would an ADC do differently on Xayah?
I mean, I don't know how to put it to words. I'm not really good at this, but I don't know. It was just I kind of had the feeling that Perks had kind of a different view of the game than normal AD carries. Like, he would also like go side lane and soak up solo XP and 1v1 the enemy side laner when he was stronger, and just be like one level up. And people weren't really doing this, and after he started doing it, it kind of changed the role a bit. So that's like one of the main things, and I thought that I would get similar stuff out from Caps, but it doesn't really feel like it at this current moment. But I think he can put it off for sure. But so far, I've like not been really impressed.
To clarify, you mean that Caps hasn't shown you anything new, or do you mean that Caps is even a guy who could do with learning from Perks' pro views this time last year? Like, which one?
He can for sure learn from Perks. Like, I think any AD carry can learn from Perks' pro view from last year. Like, those were probably one of the best ones I've watched. Like, they just have so much like quality in the sense that like the decision making is quite consistent, and I don't know, it was just really nice to watch. So I just hope that Caps can like stop being like 0-7 on Aphelios and stuff like this, because he was actually playing well in team fights on Senna, but even then for me it didn't really feel like he was like, how do I say it? He was playing at the level that Perks would be playing at this if he was in this situation. But I see that he's talking a lot as well in games, because obviously he's Caps, so I'm guessing that he's also a big part of the shot calling in the system in G2. So there's also that, right?
Yeah, he definitely is. I think when it comes to Perks and Caps, both of them kind of got really, really good at the game initially by being perma-limit testers on very bursty champions. And if you're going to be a perma-limit tester, it's better to do it on a bursty champion, because otherwise it's incredibly punishing to be out of position. Perks, however, did this 3 years before Caps started doing this. And so Perks made a transition to being a bit more of a cerebral player and a bit more of a guy who kind of just understood League of Legends itself and understood limits fairly intuitively at a point. Whereas Caps is still kind of running around like a bit of a limit tester, except now he's in a role that is significantly DPS based and much less burst based, and as a result, it's much easier to punish him on that. I think he used to get away with kind of intuitively learning stuff like Rakan ranges because he was on the champion that had a lot of escapes and a lot of bursts that they could clap back with. But right now, he's not really in that situation, so there's a bit more obvious the issues with the way that Caps learns the game. Whereas when Perks transitioned into AD carry, he was not just a very seasoned mid laner, he was a seasoned in-game leader, shot caller, a guy who took a part in the coaching of his teams. He understood fundamentally the AD carry role already before he even moved there in the first place, whereas Caps has never ever been that guy in his entire career, and he's 3 years behind Perks in terms of his career anyway. So I think that's why Caps would initially struggle moving in. He has to learn things that Perks already learned so that he could help out on his team. And that would be the fundamental issue, I think, for me. But yeah, I mean, it's just very obvious that he doesn't even understand like how some of the champions in bot lane work on the level that you kind of have to if you want to play this role at an AD carry level. Like you can do Innaxe, which means that you do have permission to shit on Caps if you ever want to. So yeah, he should learn from your provies. He should learn from your provies.
No, not at all.
Right, being another player he brought up there we could also touch on is obviously Kazi, right?
Yes.
One thing I want to say about this veteran is I actually totally get where he's coming from, because even though I've seen a bunch of LEC games where Kazi looked really good and at certain things in the game looks top level, I've also seen some really weird shit. Like, I don't know if you remember his first death in this Origin game that they just played, where he's playing Ezreal, and in lane, it's Aphelios versus Leona is the lane he's playing against, and they completely come in on him when he's near his tower, and he gets out, right? He gets out with the Yuumi. It's like, oh, brilliant, you got out. And he just goes all the way back in and just gets flash engaged on by Leona and killed literally right next to his tower. Like I literally could not believe that an Ezreal player would do this, because if you, I'm a shitter who plays bot lane, right? And you can't fucking get an Ezreal. They're like, it's like trying to catch water coming out of a fountain. You don't even try. So like, what the fuck this guy was doing? It's like, he just fed completely. Like, what is that shit? I know he's a rookie, but even so, give me a break.
I mean, he's obviously not the most consistent right now. I guess it's in his name a bit. I actually agree with what Innaxe said. Initially, I thought I was going to take issue with him, but he said that he thinks that he will be really, really good one day. That's generally what everyone means when they say that this guy's like a superstar rookie. Like, you can clearly see the potential in him. I do think in that game, he may have just been showing his coaches how much he disagreed with the drafting decisions that game, because that's literally the only LEC game that I can categorically say was 100% lost in draft. That's literally the only one. That was an obscenely lost in draft game. Yeah, obviously Kazi has some imp moments. But he also has some exceptionally good ones that go above and beyond what we're seeing from even established AD carries. When he has to show up against the best of the best, he does. He doesn't seem to have any mental blocks that you would usually see. Even the last batch of players, like Upset, for example, would occasionally have these sort of downturns in performance. Reckless was famous for this for so long versus players that they heavily respected. Kazi definitely does not have that issue right now, which bodes incredibly well for his future. He's honestly accelerating a lot faster than most people even thought. People thought he would be LEC viable next year rather than this year.
Same with Mad Lions as a team, right? They've sort of jumped a little bit ahead of the curve.
Yeah, they have.
Which also means they're going to get flamed, even though actually they're good.
Sure, yeah, I mean,
it's a good problem to have.
After their victory against Fnatic, I don't think they're going to get that much flame. Like, I actually would put them above Origin in terms of chances of being top 3. I'd put Rogue and Mad Lions over Origin right now, because I think Origin's fundamental issues are harder to fix than Mad Lions, right?
Well, actually, I wanted to have a discussion about Rogue, so we can transition to that now. Yeah. Because actually, I think that's also the reason why when I compare these teams, if you're Rogue, you must be good now. There's no excuse left. Like, you're only rookies in the most expanded sense that you have played the split before. You had some of them even before that. Now you've got the hand sum up. Like, if there's no like wait till summer, you have to be good now. So I want to ask Odoamne, actually, what do you think of Finn as a top laner?
I think Finn kind of has the benefit that the meta has been so far really in his favor for like the past year and this year as well, where it's kind of like this bruiser thing going on where he's kind of like, this guy was I think Irelia and Kled one trick, so he's kind of like most familiar with like this bruiser meta and all of this stuff and the matchups. So I think he's kind of rolling on this high that it's his meta pretty much. But I think when this guy has to play, like boring metas, like say his full tank meta comes back, or there's like only mage stop and stuff like that, that's when he will truly be tested. Because right now, it's kind of like the ball is in his court, where he gets to kind of showcase what he's best at, But there's gonna be a time where he's gonna have to showcase what he's worst at, and that's kind of like when I worry for him and his like capabilities as a top laner. But I think so far in this meta, he's pretty good. I would say. I wouldn't say he's like exceptional or anything, but I think for like what Rogue needs for him as a player, for like his role as a top laner, he's kind of like accomplishing that pretty well.
Because Veteran, this actually basically ties into my biggest criticism of Rogue. Like the reason why I've really like backed off, like I did think they could be super sick when they came in this split. The reason why I'm like way backed off that is because their top laner and jungler look amazing on their best champions, and then once you get past like 2 or 3 champions, they drop off like motherfuckers, mate.
So when it comes to Finn specifically, I remember the Rogue game versus Origin that he had, where he did some real, like the thing people were accusing Forgiven of a lot legitimately happened in that game for Finn, where there was a wave that had absolutely no need to be shoved in whatsoever in that situation. It's probably the single riskiest move he could have made given the state of the map and everything that he 100% knew, because you can just go and watch it on ProView, and he still decides to go out, shove the wave, and then die. I think a lot of the champions that Finn was excelling at on top side were champions that have a lot of outplay potential, and Set, whereas he does have outplay potential, it's not in the realm of mobility. And Finn will have the habit of burning cooldowns on the wave and not think about this stuff because he's used to playing Aatrox nonstop, or like you said, like Irelia Kled, right? These kinds of things that have a bit more obvious outplay potential and the at least ability to keep him alive. I kind of worry for him in that sense, though I do think the thing about Finn people forget is that literally like 2 to 3 years ago, basically around the time of the Origin tournament, when Origin had Forgiven and Jesses, he literally only played 3 champions at a competitive level. Like he played Sion, he played Irelia, and he played Kled, and that was it. That was the only shit he played. So he's already done a phenomenal amount of learning since then that we don't normally associate with top laners. So I'm still confident that he'll get past any champ pool issues he has right now. It's being a miracle that he hasn't had champ pool issues up to this point. It's being a miracle how many champions he's been learning, especially when you compare that to someone like Nemesis, right? Who's learned like 2 champions in 3 years. I think the bigger problem with them, rather than like whether or not Finn is individually like a boom or bust kind of player or not, and I would completely disagree with Larson being that kind of player, by the way. I think Larson has been the very model of consistency.
Well, the joke is that's the reason why last week what you really learned about Featherven is Featherven just likes people who pop off. Like the fact that he thinks Mickey is better than Larson is like the reason I didn't even bother arguing that one, mate, is he just obviously has a different context for good, doesn't he? The word good means something different to Featherven than it does to me or you.
I mean, for him, if the mid lane is not being aggressive, the
exactly. He basically thinks, no joke, that you're just a pussy if you don't get aggressive. Basically.
So the moment that Larson lets in Lissandra, he's just lost Featherven's respect for the rest of his life.
Yes.
Right? But still, given that, I think actually the biggest issue is that this team does not understand how to accelerate properly. When it comes to mid to late game in a very specific way. The only thing Rogue will do to try to close out games, no matter what the fucking composition is they will just set up red buff side vision around Baron, and they will try to make picks on that, no matter what the composition is, whether they've picked their fucking Draven composition, whether they've picked a straight 1-3-1 composition, whether they've picked a teamfight composition, they will just try to force teamfights around deep vision around Baron. That's all that they will do. And as a result, because they don't always comp for that, and they always have some form of really heavy acceleration that needs to snowball to win, like Draven, like Olaf, all these kinds of picks, their games end up getting really slow until the enemy fucks up in like the precise way. So I think that there's a barrier there for Rogue that they need to get past, because otherwise I think they have one of the best early games that we've seen from many teams. I'm not just saying that to be nice to you two, because you got completely dicked by them in early game. But they're the only team other than G2 that understands why making plays on 2 side lanes at once is actually a very strong thing, unlike every other region which still thinks you need to play safe to one side while you make a play on the other. They're the only team that's doing that. And they were doing that without even taking mid lane into account from jungle support, partly because Woolite wouldn't ever allow Vander out of his lane, or suddenly he'd be 60 CS behind that literally happened one game. But now they have the tools to do that in early games. So now it looks even better than most teams, which is why I would put them with Origin, who have even worse problems when it comes to how they try to close games. They're stuck basically in how we used to play out in HGK 2016, Odo. They're still stuck in that mode. There's so much stuff that NukeDuck and Alphari would have to probably mostly NukeDuck. Alphari is different in this regard, but NukeDuck especially would have to like unlearn before that team progresses, right? Which is why I'd still put Rogue above, because I can see exactly where they're fucking up, and it's a very easy area to teach a bunch of newer players to play differently, right? That's not as complicated as what you'd have to do for Origin, and Mad Lions are kind of similar in that regard. Like they've already made progress, so their progress has been they now play how Odo's Splice, in fact, played out mid to late game, which is not optimal, but they've changed, and they can hopefully continue to change, right? And it's easier to do that with rookies anyway. Also, I think Destiny's a pile of garbage.
He's had his problems, certainly. Certainly had his problems. Didn't you think they looked good, Origin, in that Mad Lions game, though? It seemed like they were making loads of great adjustments in that game.
Yeah, but that was literally the worst draft I've ever seen in the history of man. I mean, if any team is given, it was Gangplank, Karthus, Ornn, and then enemy team locks in Rek'Sai when they seal this, when they had Ezreal. They had Ezreal on 3rd pick. They give up the flex on 4th pick immediately to lock in Rek'Sai. What the fuck was their last pick there? Like, I just remember like hating this draft so fucking.
Yumi, maybe?
Was Yumi last pick? No, Yumi was opening pick. Yumi was first rotation. I remember that. I remember that shit. But like, it was like the worst draft I ever fucking saw. Rek'Sai into that. Like, how hard is it already to snowball Rek'Sai versus the picks that you see on the left? And then you're already putting yourself on a massive timer versus, like, you just handed them the game. Like, it's actually insane.
That draft kind of sucks, to be honest.
Oh my god, man! Like, like the only way that you could maybe accelerate is you play super hard through midsection, because you theoretically can still get like mid priority, but you have no kill pressure on the Ornn really, unless he really fucks up. So you have to do that and then roam, but you have no real setup on bot side, and top side is a fucking Gangplank, so you'll know how that's gonna go. Like it's really difficult for them to do anything in that draft. I think Origin still look good, and I really enjoy watching them play out 1-3-1. It's slightly getting nostalgic though, because they're playing 1-3-1 the way we used to do it in 2016, and it's out of date now.
Right.
Like, they're stuck in the, like, for Odo's reference, what I specifically mean is they are still stuck in the mode of, if we have turret pressure, then we do not back until the enemy backs, and they think of literally nothing else on the map right now. That seems to be how Origin is playing. But I mean, that game was just monstrous, and just like you saw how Mad Lions can be when their draft is good, like versus Fnatic. Obviously, Fnatic didn't have the best game of their lives either. But credit to Mad Lions, like we have to give credit to Schalke. Like they played it out. They played it out at least well enough to beat that team, and they were the better team on the day, right?
Okay.
And that's really insane, because I thought Mad Lions would barely be a playoffs team in spring, and then look really good in summer. No, it's much faster than that. It's much faster than that, which is really impressive considering it's an all-rookie team.
By the way, Innaxe, just since you were referencing earlier, did you ever actually watch any pro views of Forgiven?
No.
Okay. Was there any other players you watched? Because actually, I thought your insights were pretty interesting from that angle. Because even though people can talk about their role, they usually don't specifically know what the person does, So, is there any other player?
Reckless, Upset. Actually, I forgot Upset. I watched him a lot.
Okay. Do you have any insights on him from watching him?
I don't know. I mean, he's kind of the same as he was last year. I think his support is a bit worse than last year for sure. But he's still the same really good, really high, like mechanical stealing AD carry. And he seems pretty consistent when it comes to that, like being on time for mid waves, being good in lane. I don't know. I can't really see any flaws in Upset, honestly, like from my point of view at least.
The mid-wave things is actually a really big point, because Upset used to be a guy who you could easily catch on mid-waves, and that's what I used to call Sven syndrome. Well, I still call it Sven syndrome, it just doesn't apply to Upset now. But he's actually gotten a lot better at that, which you do need to do to make that team work, because they're always going to play 1-3-1.
By the way, just as an aside, Veteran, I actually do love how utterly ridiculous people are in League of Legends and esports generally. That, like, even though the most reasonable perspective on an Oceanic player coming to a Western region would be probably won't make it. Apparently, you're an idiot if you said that. And what you're supposed to do is, this is actually not real life. It's a Disney movie where a little guy in the minor leagues gets the big call up from the big city slickers. And you know what? Because he came from that cool little place, he had mom's apple pie. You know, everyone's telling him, well, you could do it, son. You've made it now. Like, he's going to go to the big city and he's going to show them, Veteran, that believing in God and playing in the local softball game, anything's possible. No! What was the odds that the Destiny and the Rioma guy would be really good? Like, it wasn't that high. Like, I understand. Here's the thing, Veteran. If they were just honest in these teams and they just admitted, out of a choice of cheap players who aren't good, or this guy who I'm going to gamble on, that's a perfectly legit angle to take these players on. But if you're really pretending like Origin did, because they have the hubris to pretend like they're a massive org, like, we could have picked anyone in Europe and we chose this guy from Oceanic region. Well, in that case, you're an idiot. You're a fucking idiot. Everyone who was telling me, like when I had Grabs on fucking, I think it was on Listen Loco, RIP, now deceased of course. I think it was when I had Grabs on that show where he was telling me like, well, who else could they have taken? And I said Mystiques, and he was like, yeah, he's not that good. He's better than fucking Destiny. I'll tell you that right now. You apologise right now, Grabs, to fucking Mystiques on Twitter. Tell him right now you're sorry for what you said. You take it all back. That's some bullshit. Like, mate, there's so many better players than this guy. I'm not saying he can't make it. Still time. We're not going to do a Forgiven. It's only halfway in the split. There's still a lot to go.
Yeah, we can segue to a team that will only talk about for like 2 to 3 minutes max. But this is actually a really good segue into them. You know which rookie support did look really fucking good this weekend when he debuted? Was Steelback, by the way. Steelback actually looked phenomenal.
Oh, by the way, wait a second. Before we get into that, there's one thing we have to address, Veteran.
Okay.
Because you must have enjoyed this the same way I did. Like, normally, listen, I enjoy drama, but a lot of it isn't actually as satisfying.
Oh, I know what you guys are going to
Oh, of course. But I don't know if I've ever literally sat there just lapping up the Schadenfreude. Brilliant German word, by the way. One of the few things in their language I appreciate. That brilliant Schadenfreude of seeing Attila actually come out and just literally 360 windmill donk onto fucking Jack Troll's head. And has like his own bot lane partner. Like, that was so insane. I don't think I've seen anything like that in a long time. Because that was so righteous as well, Veteran. Like, I'm not even an Attila fan, but I fucked with him in that moment. That was so sick.
Yes. Oh, no, but Attila, like, if you were on the bench either of these two, like, we can all admit, the bot lane of Vitality probably wasn't the strongest. But if you're going to bench only one of them, to bench Attila and not Jack Troll? Like, did you actually ever watch the preview of these things?
And then the idea that Jack Troll, who literally at this point in time, as far as I'm concerned, is like one of those fucking guys in like a movie who's robbed a bank and he's getting away with it. The idea, after you get away with it, you then have the gall to call out your ex-partner, who was way better than you were, and then make out like he was the problem. Holy fuck, like, do you not know the saying, Jack Troll, like, quit while you're ahead? Like, what the fuck are you doing, bro? You got away with it. You got away with murder, and you're just going back to the scene of the crime. What are you doing?
I mean, it's just hubris. Like, I'll let Odo talk.
I mean, it's a like, I don't. But this is the thing. I don't understand like both of them, like both Attila and Jack Troll. Like, these two are so cocky when it's legit. Attila sometimes is hinting so hard, or he's getting stomped so hard, and he's getting hard carried, and then he's cocky when this guy is not even that good. But then you have Jack Troll, who I think was a game in LEC where he went 0-15 or something. How many deaths did he have in that game?
I can't remember, actually.
He's definitely one of the worst supports to have ever played as long as he did.
10 plus deaths on Tam Kench. And he had 10 plus deaths on Tam Kench, and then he goes on Twitter and he flames his AD carry for being boosted.
I mean, did you see what he responded to? What he responded to first? Technically speaking, Attila did start it. Most people don't know that because when Attila started it, he started it on a Spanish talk show talking Spanish.
Oh, right. Okay.
But what he did was that he said that he heard that there were going to be some changes made to Vitality tonight, hinting at Steelback coming in, right? And someone else on the talk show said, So is Jack Troll going to Giants then? And Attila said, I would rather cut my balls off in Spanish. And that's
fair enough.
None of us would have known that. None of us would have known that if Jack Troll didn't then quote the video clip of it and then respond to it. Because most of you guys don't even know that now, right? He didn't have to let it stay there. No one would have known shit. People still don't even know shit about it. He could have just let it stay there. I agree with Attila, though. And Innaxe, no matter how bad it gets in there, it could always be at least slightly worse. And you can always think about that, right? Because
exactly.
I don't know how Jack Troll is still in the LEC. And there were rumors even that he put this team together.
He must secretly own Vitality or something, or has like fucking Apple stock or something. Like, I don't know how this guy's staying in. It's amazing at this point in time.
What he has done, though, is that if you're a Vitality fan and you've been watching Jack Troll this whole time, and then you see Steelback come in, have to leash on bot side, enemy doesn't leash whatsoever. He goes in and immediately burns Denix flash, and then immediately roams midsection, then just fucking dives top while his bot laner is on a perfect wave. Like, after you see that, you must just think Steelback's the biggest god, like, ever that you've ever seen. Unfortunately, his team is still dog shit, but Steelback looked ridiculously good and showed everything that everyone's been saying about Steelback. He's the only guy that understands high-level LEC support concepts that even half of the LEC supports don't understand, that wasn't already playing in LEC. And I guarantee you, for Origin, like, you definitely could have gotten Steelback cheap. It's just that the thing I thought you were initially going to bring up, Thorin, because I'd actually forgotten about the Attila thing, was the fact that Steelback debuts as Forgiven is gone. And I was thinking about the Steelback
the classic
boosted angle. Yeah.
Let's be real, though. Here's the thing, right? Even though, Veteran, I know what you mean. Bearing in mind that was about when he was an ADC.
Yeah.
Actually, that Forgiven burn was righteous as fuck as well. Like, that was one of his best ever Twitter burns. Like,
it was.
Because what he did basically was, this is obviously before Forgiven now will be remembered as a joke and probably no one will give a fuck anymore. But at the time, he was still like a legendary ADC. So the fact that he just came out of the shadows of nowhere, and it's like Steelback was only talking a tiny bit of shit. And he just came out and basically just like, it's like the fucking Undertaker just coming out now and just like tombstoning someone. Like, it's a classic move, isn't it? It's amazing.
No, that was a really good play. But the point I was trying to make with that is that he doesn't have the best connections and reputation with a lot of the established.
His name definitely doesn't have the value that his play does. But
I mean, if you ask everyone in Origin, are they really going to say they want to play with Steelback? Probably not. Was Schalke, if they were building a team with Forgiven, ever going to ask Steelback? Probably not. You know,
Makes sense.
There are plenty of teams where I can see that based on some of the players in his previous relationship with them. He's probably not getting on that team, but I hope he keeps getting good performances. I hope Melitza ever actually starts for them, because Sarkin, you know, like, he's a good ERL player, and that's what I'll say about him. But like, they have issues right now that do need to be fixed by Melitza actually finally coming back. But I hope they keep starting Steelback.
That's also another angle people are really missing about LEC. When you consider Vitality haven't even had what was supposed to be their star mid lane the whole time. Now we've upgraded support. Schalke did these two moves that look good. Basically, like, the actual floor level of LEC is going to be bonkers in a couple of weeks from now.
Yeah.
I guarantee you there's no way G2's putting up a monster set of number of wins. Like, I'm going back to saying that they're going to get, like, fucking 9 wins or something, mate. 10 wins or something.
I also just want to say, because, like, obviously you fucked up and you could use this as an excuse to segue into one of the last two teams you haven't talked about. But Odo said that Razork and FORG1VEN were doing really, really well. And obviously Denick, like, fucks up versus Steelback a bit, but well, probably in a pretty big way. But I actually think Tenix had a really solid 2 weekends, to be honest, outside of that one game versus Vitality, where still he did really well in mid game. I actually think Denix stepping up really, really well for them, and I think it's more like a Razork and Denick thing rather than just a Razork thing. But obviously, if you pick Echo and then you have that snowbally game against G2, everyone's just going to think about you. But I really do think Denick's kind of an understated hero for that team right now. He's setting up a lot for them, especially in mid game scenarios, and like. Just to rub it in on them one more time, watching Denick's Rakan and watching fucking Destiny's Rakan is goddamn night and day. Like, holy shit. Like, it really is. And this guy was definitely cheap as well. And you didn't have to buy him out from Giants because his contract was running out. And by the way, Origin, Lavrov is going to be available in summer, and he's going to be cheap as well. And he's really fucking good. And upset talks now, so you can make Lavrov work.
Here's the thing that these teams genuinely don't get, Veteran, is the reason why the best investment right now is people to scout the National League scene. It's because there's only 10 spots in the LEC for every role. So even if you don't get the number one guy from the National Leagues, let's say you get the fourth best player at support, all the other fucking support positions are taken anyway. So you can basically get that guy knowing he can't get into LEC unless he joins your team. You can even offer him the minimum possible salary. Like it's not even good. That's the stupidest part of all this, is if you just have the scout, it's almost guaranteed he's worth more than the money you will pay him. That's why it's crazy these teams are missing these opportunities.
No, I hate
importing players, for fuck's sake.
Now, I obviously hate that about franchising, because basically you just
it's terrible. You're fucking the player completely.
Yeah, you just gave Schalke a really good excuse to like cut Innaxe's salary as much as they want, because where else are you going to go, Innaxe, right? Like, but at the same time, it's true. Why aren't you doing this? Like, how you're never going to convince me that you looked into everything and the cheapest thing you could do was go Australia. I'm always going to think that there were caster connections that got Destiny in. There's no way. Yeah, there's no way. There's no fucking way that you looked at the National League and decided it's not worth it, unless obviously Upset did his whole grass is greener on the other side thing again. But Upset is at least claiming that he had no part in the scouting. It was all Origin.
I mean, I don't know about the scouts, honestly, but my problem is like, we need scouts, but where are these scouts, and
they're all
who's gonna scout the scouts? Like, how do you know a good scout? How do you
basically? I was just saying someone should just pay a Veteran, basically.
Yeah, basically pay me.
Like I feel like
the only way.
Scouts are like either, I mean, not even team managers, like coaches that actually know the game, or ex-players. I can see them being good scouts.
Sure.
Like anything else, like how the fuck do you know if this guy knows his shit? Like, let's say like some random guy comes up to Schalke office and he's like, I know a lot about league. I'm a scout. I know talent. Like, how do you like quantify, like what is it portfolio? Like, I picked up these players for these teams. That's kind of like as far as you can go, no? So I think it's obviously needed to have these scouts and to be able to see which players are actually good and like what kind of team they need and what environment they need. But I feel like there's just too little people that know this. And
you're totally right. But it's the same as with coaches back in the day, Nax. That was the same thing everyone said when coaches first came in. Like, but they're all going to be terrible, and how can they be good? Yeah, because no one's done it before. So you basically have to start, and some of them are going to be bad. And then over time, some of them will be better, and then people will figure out who the good ones are, and then eventually we'll get them. So you are right. Like, at the moment, just because we need it doesn't mean we got it. But to me, it's just even economically, it's the obvious move to do if you're an LEC. Like, this is the region to do it in.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talent from ERL. Obviously, I kind of came from there, ignoring Worlds. And there's also other players that are really good in ERL teams. There's a lot of teams in ERL that like big talent goes through. There's like Giants. There's even like Kiev. You know, I went through Kiev. Karzi went through Kiev. Zaza went through Kiev. Labrov was in Kiev as well, I think. Odoamne as well. Yeah, like there's a lot of like teams that somehow get these like good talents, you know. Maybe it's fake data, you know, maybe it's not, it's just like luck, but there's for sure some teams that always find these like really good talents that
of course.
You know, the Origin BCN lineup from last year that was just randomly really good, even though there were a bunch of players people basically hadn't heard of. The guy who built that roster built the KIF rosters.
No, I know Javis. I worked with him, but I wouldn't personally, like, how do I say, praise the Origin Barcelona roster, because their play style was literally cookie cutter stage performance. Pick skating, clear every wave, and win team fights, guys. Yumi Victor every game. So I wouldn't put that roster up there, but for sure Travis had a lot of good talent coming through and going out from Kiev and Origin Barcelona. But just not that roster.
I think Sajenda, Zanzibar, and Homi are ones that should get a look in. Homi is on the lower tier than a lot of the other supports that should be going into LEC, obviously. But I think Sajenda might actually be the best top laner in the ERLs right now, especially given that Agressivo isn't having like that good of a split, though I think that might just be frustration a bit on his part. But I think Sagenda is incredibly good, and he was from that Origin roster. Obviously, Zanzibar's a bit tank-only right now, but he is one of the smartest junglers that we have.
Yeah, he's really smart.
So, yeah. So I do think there's still talent there. I do think Roizon's crap, though.
No comment.
Yeah.
I even throw in as well, Veteran, the other thing that this should mean actually for LEC is like, it also should be the one league in the world where nobody ever recycles a bad, great player from the past and then pays him a good salary. That should never be happening in LEC. It doesn't make any economical sense when you can go and get like a guy from the national leagues who's already good now and pay him even less. Like, it doesn't make any sense to do that now.
Yeah, no, it makes no sense whatsoever. I thought you were going to segue into bringing things full circle there, because there's a really obvious way you could have done that with where that line of thinking was going. But yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is that it used to be that teams kind of ignored how much rookie talent that there was in the ERLs, but then they would come up through Challenger League, disqualify them, and then qualify for Worlds that year. That happened so many times. Odoamne was on one of these teams that qualified for Worlds the same year they came in, that they came out of Challenger Series. Like, we've been a region that's been very, very big on that. For people to suddenly forget about that because franchising is in place seems like willful ignorance on my part. But luckily, everyone started losing money, so they had no choice but to grab up as many rookies as they possibly could. So hooray for the failure of the market here. Because that's keeping rookies in with a job. Hooray! Great, brilliant. If franchising was going like it should, like people wanted it to go, then you'd be looking at everyone. It would be the North America situation. It would be the North America situation, right? Yeah, it would. But luckily, it's a market failure here. So we're all good, and rookies still have their place. But my worry is that if teams actually do start making money here, then if we don't use this time to encourage the kind of things you're saying, like we need to develop actual scouting systems.
Sure.
We need to get people who actually understand the ERLs, get more people involved in them who can understand it, right? If we don't have these in place, then at a point when these teams have money, we may just be looking at another America, and like, they like Rioma, as far as I know, has been running it down over there, right? We have Destiny over here. You're just looking at like a glimpse into a future that we may have if we don't address this now. And now is the time to address it, when they have no choice but to hire rookies. And Innaxe is spearheading that, right? Like, he's one of the rookies that is spearheading that. He came in, replaced one of the old guard guys, and they immediately beat G2, right? Like, what do you have to lose? Apparently, you'll just beat G2 if you do it. Like, it's all good, right? And Mad Lions just beat Fnatic. This is how you beat the top two teams. Just hire you guys. There you go.
This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Andrew, Blunt Smoking Anus Destroyer, Dean Tanglis, Chi Mao, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, Peter the Feeder, Tobias Bernasconi, and a special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Maybe you want to ask me a question in my monthly AMA. Would you like teasers for who the next guests are on my shows? Maybe you even want to take part in a niche, obscure esports discussion with me. We'll put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.